joined today by Liz Dennery. She is the founder of SheBrand. She is a brand consultant and the creative director. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We have a lot to talk about. I'm a big fan, I have to say. So tell me a little bit about how you discovered your passion, and when you discovered your passion, did you always want to be in the branding field, or did you start off doing something completely different?
You know, it's interesting because I think I'm still discovering my passion, and I discovered it a little bit later in life. I actually went to school in Boston thinking that I wanted to be a news anchor. Someone who was a role model for me growing up was a good friend of my mother's who was a successful news anchor in New Orleans. And in school, I ended up doing a number of internships in marketing and PR. First for Warner Brothers Pictures, and then next, interestingly enough, for a PR firm owned by two women. And so I loved doing that work. And at the same time, I loved my English classes. And ultimately, I realized that I didn't want to pay my dues as a television anchor in Podunkville. And because that's really what most of news anchors have to do, is go and work somewhere in the middle of nowhere for a number of years before they really make it. And I was loving my PR work, and that's really how I began. However, I didn't discover my real passion until much later in life. It was my late 30s before I put two and two together. And it was through the philanthropic work that I was doing that I realized what was most important to me. So I had my PR agency at the time, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But I was also volunteering, first in New York, for an organization called Women in Need that worked with homeless women and their children, at-risk women and their kids. And then when I moved to Los Angeles with Step Up Women's Network.
Right.
And I was a mentor, and I was teaching classes in interviewing skills and self-esteem and feeling confident. And I was driving home one night, this was about 10 years ago, from a meeting with a mentee. And at the time, I was feeling pretty unfulfilled in my PR business. And I realized it was this mini epiphany, if you will, this download, the name SheBrand popped into my head. And I said, why can't I put my 20 plus years of marketing and branding and PR work specifically towards helping women and women and girls? And that's how SheBrand was born. It was literally because of the philanthropic work that I was doing with at-risk women and girls that I realized that what I was most passionate about was giving women and girls a voice, helping them to connect to their voice and use their voices more powerfully.
So tell me a little bit about SheBrand. What is the branding of SheBrand? What is the niche for SheBrand?
SheBrand is different than what I was doing before. I had a very traditional marketing and public relations agency, Dennery Marks. And SheBrand is very much about elevating women's voices. So we work with individuals as well as companies that speak to women and market to women. We help them communicate more effectively. We work on their messaging and ultimately connect and engage with their audience in a more powerful way.
So walk me through, what is a typical day, if there is a typical day? What's a typical day if someone's thinking about entering your field? What does that look like?
Right. So first and foremost, there is no typical day, but I do try to give it some structure. For example, I only see clients on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Mondays are very much my admin days, my writing days. Fridays are a little bit of catch up for me. If I have a little bit of writing to do, I will do it on a Friday. Or sometimes Fridays are personal days or time with my son. But I would say more typically than not, on a day that I'm seeing clients, I might have a couple of client meetings, either in person or often virtually, because I do work with clients all over, really all over the world. Right. And with technology today, we now have the ability to talk with people everywhere. And so I'm doing brand consultations, which is doing brand foundation work, which we were talking about earlier. And that might be an hour to an hour and a half meeting. When I'm working with larger brands, it might be a photo shoot, or I might be at a meeting with a graphic designer doing the creative direction either on a website or a lookbook. I might be meeting with the CEO of a company in their office. I might be in New York meeting with some editors or producers. So there really is, from a work perspective, no typical day.
Right.
But I usually start my day around 6:15, and I have a little morning ritual of, even if it's just 5 minutes of meditation and affirmations. I get my son up, we have breakfast together, I take him to school. I sometimes try to fit a workout in. I do try to do Pilates 3 or 4 days a week, which has changed my life. I've been doing it for about 15 years.
Nice.
And it has saved my spine. So I do that. And then it's really meetings with clients, photo shoots, phone calls, events, sometimes speaking on panels, a little bit of travel thrown in here or there. So I personally like the variety, and I tend to thrive on it, which is probably one of the reasons that I do what I do.
So what steps would you tell someone a little bit younger to take if they want to follow in your footsteps?
So if they'd like to work in branding and marketing,
Yes.
potentially with women,
Yes.
I'm such a huge proponent of internships. I did a number of internships while I was in college and right after college, and it's that practical experience that really, really made a difference for me. So I would say, first and foremost, get an internship, get a couple of internships, see what you're interested in, and just go test the waters, go try it out. And then get in front of people who you're interested in, who, you love their work. You'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to have a 15-minute phone conversation or a quick 30-minute coffee date with you, to help you understand more about the work that they're doing. So it really goes back to what we were talking about earlier, not being afraid to ask.
Right.
To ask for the meeting, to ask for a 15-minute phone conversation, to get some experience, get the internship. That is sometimes what I see is missing from young people today. They want to jump right into actually doing the work without really testing the waters and finding the nuances, because they might actually discover that they're really interested in a very specific component of that work and then follow that endeavor specifically.
That's great advice. So is it difficult to get an internship in this field, do you think?
No, I don't think so. What's interesting is all of the universities, or I should say many of them, many that I have worked with, and here in California, we worked with USC and with UCLA, and they have job boards and internship boards. We often would work with the communication departments, and we always found great interns through the colleges that we worked with. So I would say that if you're in school, look to see what your school has in terms of their relationships with companies that are looking for interns. I think that most companies today are looking for great interns, somebody that is willing to work hard and be committed, whether that's for 3 months or 6 months. Some internships last longer. If you are loving the work, there's no reason why you shouldn't stay for a year,
Right.
and then maybe try something else. So I think schools are the best place to start. And then perhaps researching, whether it's through like a local city business paper. They often will come out with lists of top 100 companies in different industries. And so start researching companies that are in an industry that you are interested in, and literally call reception and say, do you accept interns? Do you take summer interns? Do you take fall interns? Who do I need to talk to? And don't just send your resume.
Right.
Really show that you've done your research. Show that you know a little bit about the company. Send a cover letter. Follow up with an email. Follow up with a phone call. I believe that persistence and that enthusiasm is what is going to get you the job in the first place.
Very true. I second that. Every intern that I've ever worked with that showed persistence and enthusiasm, even if they didn't know your field, we say, I'll take that person all day long. They're willing to learn and they're excited. So yeah, I agree.
I really believe that if you are willing to go the extra mile,
Yep.
You would be surprised at how far that will take you. When I have listed jobs, when we've had assistant jobs, executive assistant jobs, and virtual assistant jobs available at SheBrand, you would be surprised at how many people literally just forward a resume. I would say that a good 40% we just delete. We don't even look at. And sometimes we will put a specific point or a specific criteria in the job description, such as in the subject line of your email, please put, a specific, we might say something silly like, black and white cookies or something like that.
Right.
And whoever doesn't do that automatically gets deleted from the process because you want someone who can follow directions, obviously. So, it's easier for us to interview a smaller batch of individuals than hundreds of people. And you'd be surprised.
So you have to be a creative, I would think, doing what you do. And then you've got to be a very smart businesswoman because we're talking about you're creating a brand, an image to make that connection. So that's your emotional side. But then it has to pay off into, you're going to monetize that in some way, shape, or form. So what's your thought process? What's the process with a new client when you take them through that? Can you share a little bit about how hard that is to put that together? Because I can't imagine it's easy.
I think a lot of people put the cart before the horse when it comes to their branding and their marketing. So they are thrown by lots of bright, shiny objects out there. I mean, we are inundated with noise. Right. And so they feel like they have to keep up, and they are out there buying ads on Facebook and tweeting and sending out flyers to their audience and all the different things that can encompass a marketing campaign. But they're doing all of that before they've taken the time to do the brand foundation work, which again is very much about, it really is, I like to call it an archaeological dig, really figuring out, who am I? What do I stand for? What is most important to me? Why am I doing the work that I'm doing? And why should people care about it? You have to be able to define all of those things before you can put a messaging strategy together, before you can decide how you want to best communicate with your audience. So I always say, let's do the brand foundation work first. And that is 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.9 times out of 10, what I focus on with clients first. It's very much about the heart of their brand, the beating heart and the ethos, before we can go into marketing strategy and social media strategy.
Do you see a difference between people that have a concept of having the need for a brand if they've got a big product versus a personal brand?
So that's a great question, and I get it all the time. Branding as an individual versus a corporation versus a product. And a lot of individuals actually don't realize that they are a brand, that everything that they do, everything that they say, how they interact, they're constantly being perceived. And so first and foremost, it's really important from a personal branding standpoint for people to realize that they are a brand. And truthfully, the process is very similar, whether we are working with an individual like a Serena Williams or a Kelly Rutherford, or we are working with a larger brand with thousands of products like an Escada. We still look at who are they, what are they trying to communicate, and what is the ethos of either the individual or the product. So there still is a brand foundation to be built, regardless of whether you are working with an individual or a company.
So I just spent a lot of time with some top digital influencers, and branding is a little different from them. But what's your take on how should, if I came to you and said I wanted to be a digital influencer, do I need a logo for a personal brand? Because most of those influencers are just one person,
right,
and they're mad crazy on their phone, and they're doing all kinds of great things. Do you need a logo? Where should you start? You recommend the handbook, which is phenomenal, by the way. But do you recommend the handbook? Should they slow down, take a breath, go through the process? Because once you're out there, you're out there. Thoughts on that?
So many people focus too much on the logo or the color palette. And while those things are important, What's much more important is the connection. How am I connecting with my audience? How am I communicating? So if you came to me and said, Liz, I really want to be a digital influencer, how can I make that happen? I would first and foremost say, why do you want to be a digital influencer? Why is it important to you? What is the command message, if you will, that you want to get across to your audience? And so again, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the brand foundation, it's incredibly important to first ask yourself these questions before you start posting on Instagram and tweeting and posting on Facebook and being out there. Because again, people are everywhere and there's a lot of noise. And I think that consumers are starting to tune out. And I think that what is going to resonate for them is a very clear message that is meant for them in the first place. Because here's the other thing that's really important. You are not meant for everyone. Right. And so I see a lot of digital influencers, and I've had people come to me and say, I just want to reach everyone and I want 10 million followers. And really, that's not the point. The point is, who are you meant to reach? Because not everyone is going to love you. I really like what my friend John Morgan wrote in his great book, Brand Against the Machine. And he talks about how 50% of people out there aren't really going to care. You know, you're just going to be part of the noise for them. And then 30% of people are really going to love you, that your material and who you are and what you stand for is really going to resonate. And then about 20% really aren't going to like you. And it's not going to have anything to do with you. And you might even have a few haters. And that's okay too, because really when you have haters, it means that you're touching a nerve and that you are out there in a bigger way. And that's a good thing. So don't be afraid of the haters.
Do you have any advice for someone or a company that wants to say, this is great in the beginning, but how do we sustain that interest?
That's a really good question. I mean, it really is all about evolving, right? So I believe that a brand is a living, breathing force in and of itself, whether it's an individual or a company or a product or a service. And so a living, breathing organism always evolves. So it's keeping it fresh, it's communicating with your audience, it's being inclusive of your audience and allowing them to participate, and you shape-shifting and growing as a result of those conversations.
So that brings me to rebranding. What if someone has launched their brand, whether it's a small brand, a big brand, but they've launched their brand and they realize that maybe they're a few years into it and they didn't take the time or they're not thrilled with their messaging? Do you ever advise people to rebrand? Can you rebrand without killing your current brand?
You can absolutely 100% rebrand. In fact, I work with people all of the time on rebranding. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you are thoughtful about it. You go through the process, you educate your audience, you perhaps even include them on the journey. In fact, I often recommend that. People are so frightened of changing a logo, changing a tagline, mixing it up a little bit. And really, that's what keeps it interesting. I'm not an advocate for changing your logo every month, but if you've been at it for a few years and you have outgrown your original messaging, there is nothing wrong with. In fact, I highly recommend a refresh.
Do you have some words of wisdom as far as damage control and crisis management when you go through a rebranding situation?
Yes, in terms of crisis management and damage control, I really believe that you have to communicate. You cannot go silent. The brands that make the biggest mistakes avoid the crisis, they avoid the questions, or they wait too long to come out with a statement. I think it's very important to, if you make a mistake as a company, if you do something wrong, to admit that mistake and to talk about it and to make a statement quickly, to meet it up front. It's the only way that you are going to take control of your narrative, because otherwise other people are going to do it for you, and that's even more of a disaster.
Your website is perfection. I love it. I
Thank
also
you.
saw that there's many tools and books that people can order if they wanted to get started. Maybe they're not ready to hire you on a full-time basis, but they kind of want to get their feet wet. So can you tell me a little bit about what they can expect when they visit your site?
Yes, we have a tool called 101 Ways to Build a Powerful Brand. It's on the homepage of our site, so someone can go to SheBrand.com, sign up, and they'll get the ebook. And it's a really, really great resource with lots of tips and lots of tools. And then my book, Style and Substance, does take someone through the process of creating their own brand handbook. And so that book is on Amazon. It's $18, and it's a really accessible tool if they want to do it themselves and if they want to work on it themselves.
Definitely, I recommend that. That's excellent. Well, I thank you. It's been a lovely conversation. I've learned a lot. I know the viewers have learned a lot about branding, and hopefully some people will reach out to you and ask for some more in-depth help.
Thank you.